The blood-soaked handkerchief told Delilah Ross everything she needed to know about the stranger who just stumbled into her father's mercantile in Wickenburg, Arizona Territory, 1879. Though he tried to hide it, death was written all over his sun-weathered face. "Just need some supplies, madam," the tall cowboy said, his voice strained as he leaned against the counter, one hand pressed firmly against his side. "Ammunition, jerky, coffee if you've got it." Delilah watched him carefully, noting how his free hand trembled slightly as he reached for his coin purse. "You're bleeding," she said matter-of-factly, setting aside the inventory ledger she'd been working on. He glanced down at his side where crimson was seeping through his fingers and staining his once blue shirt a rusty brown. "It'll heal," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "Not that way it won't," Delilah replied, moving around the counter. "Let me see." "I don't need help, madam," he protested, but his legs betrayed him. Buckling as he tried to step back, Delilah caught him by the arm, surprised by her own strength as she steadied the tall man. "My father's not here and I'm closing up shop. You're coming with me to see Dr. Miller." The stranger's blue eyes, startlingly bright against his tanned skin, met hers with stubborn resistance. "I've dealt with worse, and I've buried men who have said the same," she countered, already reaching for her shawl. "I'm Delilah Ross, and you are." He hesitated, then seemed to decide there was no point in remaining anonymous when he was bleeding all over her floor. Owen Quinn. "Well, Mr. Quinn, you can either walk to the doctor's with me or I can have the sheriff drag what's left of you there tomorrow. Your choice." A ghost of a smile crossed his pale lips. "You don't leave a man much choice, Miss Ross." "No, I don't," she agreed, locking the shop door behind them. "Not when he's being a fool." As they walked slowly down Wickenburg's Main Street, the setting sun painting the dusty road gold, Delilah felt the weight of the stranger's arm across her shoulders. She wondered what kind of trouble he was in. Bullet wounds in these parts usually meant one of three things: outlaws, Indians, or a gambling disagreement gone wrong. She hoped it wasn't outlaws. Wickenburg had seen enough of those, Doctor. Miller's office was a small adobe structure at the edge of town, its windows glowing with lamplight against the approaching dusk. The doctor himself answered Delilah's knock, his spectacles pushed up on his forehead and sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Miss Ross," he said, then noticed her companion. "I see you've brought me work." "Found him bleeding in the mercantile," she explained, helping Owen inside. "Bullet wound, I think." "Not a bullet," Owen corrected weakly as the doctor guided him to an examination table. "Knife." Dr. Miller's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a knife." "Quite a disagreement," Owen replied. "I'll wait outside," Delilah said, turning toward the door. "No." Owen's hand caught her wrist, surprising her with its strength despite his condition. "Stay, please." She looked at his face, seeing something vulnerable beneath the stoic exterior. Fear, perhaps, or simple loneliness. Whatever it was, she found herself nodding. "I'll need to clean and stitch this," Dr. Miller announced after examining the wound. "It's deep, but it hasn't hit anything vital that I can tell." "You're lucky, Mr. Quinn," Delilah supplied. "Owen Quinn." "Well, Mr. Quinn, Miss Ross is right. This wound wouldn't have healed on its own. Infection would have set in within days. You'd have been dead inside a week." Owen's eyes met Delilah's across the room. "Then it seems I owe Miss Ross my life." "You can thank me by explaining how you came by that knife wound," she replied, folding her arms across her chest. Dr. Miller chuckled as he gathered his supplies. "Delilah Ross doesn't beat around the bush, Mr. Quinn. Never has. She came by it honestly. Her father's the same way." "It's a long story," Owen said, wincing as the doctor began cleaning the wound. "We've got time," Delilah responded, settling into a chair near the examination table. "Unless you've got pressing business elsewhere." The look he gave her was equal parts exasperation and admiration. "You're persistent, aren't you?" "Stubborn as a mule, my father says." She smiled slightly. "Start talking, Mr. Quinn. Who stuck a knife in your side?" Owen sighed, his body tensing as Dr. Miller began stitching the wound. "Man called Blackwell, James Blackwell." "We had a disagreement over a horse." "Your horse or his?" Delilah asked. "Mine now," Owen replied, a hint of defiance in his voice. He stole her from me 6 months ago in Prescott. I tracked him to a camp outside town yesterday. We had words, then knives. And Blackwell, doctor. Miller asked, not looking up from his work. Owen's jaw tightened. Won't be stealing any more horses. Delilah studied him, trying to determine if he was an outlaw himself or simply a man who'd taken justice into his own hands when the law had failed him. In the Arizona Territory, the distinction often blurred. You killed him, she stated. He came at me first, Owen said defensively. I didn't go looking for a fight, just my property. Dr. Miller tied off the last stitch. There, 23 stitches. You'll need to keep this clean and come back in a week so I can check it. I won't be here that long, Owen said, starting to sit up. The doctor pushed him back down. You will if you want to live. That wound needs proper care and you need rest. Any significant exertion could tear those stitches, and you've already lost plenty of blood. Owen looked ready to argue, but Delilah cut in. My father has a room above the store you can rent. It's clean and you'll have meals included. I don't need charity, he said stiffly. It's not charity if you're paying, she countered. Unless you'd prefer the hotel where everyone in town can see you come and go, including the sheriff who might be interested in a stabbing outside town. Owen's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, Miss Ross? Offering you a solution, Mr. Quinn. Take it or leave it. Dr. Miller coughed discreetly. If I may offer my medical opinion, Mr. Quinn, Miss Ross's offer is sound. You need rest, and her father's cooking is far better than what they serve at the hotel. A long moment passed before Owen nodded reluctantly. 1 week then. 1 week, Delilah agreed, extending her hand to help him up. And in return, you'll help in the store while my father's away. That wasn't part of the deal, he protested. It is now, she said firmly. I'm not running that place alone for another week. Dr. Miller chuckled. I believe you've met your match in stubbornness, Mr. Quinn. So it seems, Owen muttered, wincing as he got to his feet. Lead the way, Miss Ross. The walk back to the mercantile was slow, with Owen leaning heavily on Delilah despite his obvious efforts to maintain his independence. Night had fallen completely now, and the town was quiet except for the distant piano music drifting from the saloon. Your father's away. Owen asked as they approached the store. Tucson, Delilah explained, fumbling with the keys to the side entrance that led upstairs. Buying new stock. He's been gone 3 days and won't be back for at least 4 more, Owen frowned. He left you alone to mind the store. I'm 22, Mr. Quinn, not 12, she replied, pushing the door open. I've been helping run this store since my mother died 6 years ago. I meant no offense, he said quickly. It just seems a lot for one person. Hence why you're helping, she reminded him, lighting a lamp to illuminate the narrow staircase. The room's at the top. It's small but clean. The room was indeed small, with just enough space for a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. A window overlooked the main street, its curtains fluttering slightly in the evening breeze. It'll do fine, Owen said, easing himself onto the edge of the bed with a poorly disguised grimace of pain. Delilah set the lamp down on the washstand. I'll bring up some supper and fresh water for washing. There's a clean shirt in the drawer. It belonged to my brother before he moved to California. Owen looked up at her, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. Why are you helping me? Would you believe Christian charity? She asked, one eyebrow raised. Not for a second, he replied with unexpected humor. You're too practical for that. Delilah smiled despite herself. Get some rest, Mr. Quinn. Your first day of work starts tomorrow. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. Thank you, Miss Ross. Truly, she turned back, struck by the sincerity in his voice. You're welcome, Mr. Quinn. Just don't die in my father's guest room. The paperwork would be terrible. His soft laughter followed her down the stairs, and Delilah found herself smiling as she entered her family's living quarters to prepare a meal for her unexpected guest. Morning came too early, sunlight streaming through the window and across Owen's face. He groaned, the movement sending a sharp pain through his side. For a moment he was confused by his surroundings until the events of the previous day came rushing back, the mercantile, Miss Ross. The doctor. He sat up carefully, testing the extent of his injury. It hurt, but it was a clean, healing pain rather than the hot, throbbing agony of yesterday. The wound had been properly tended, and though he'd never admitted aloud, the doctor and Miss Ross had been right. He couldn't have dealt with this alone. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Quinn, are you decent?" "Decent enough," he called back, quickly pulling the borrowed shirt over his head. Delilah entered carrying a tray with coffee, biscuits, and what smelled like bacon. Her hair was neatly pinned back, and she wore a simple blue dress with an apron tied around her waist. In the morning light, he noticed details he'd missed yesterday: the slight dusting of freckles across her nose, the auburn highlights in her brown hair, the determined set of her jaw that somehow didn't detract from her femininity. "You look better," she observed, setting the tray on the chest of drawers. Less like death warmed over. "Your bedside manner needs work, Miss Ross," he said, but there was no real irritation in his voice. "I save my sweetness for paying customers," she replied, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Speaking of which, the store opens in 30 minutes. Think you can manage to come downstairs by then?" Owen took the offered cup, their fingers brushing briefly. "I'll be there," she nodded, heading for the door. "Good, your first task will be inventory of the back storeroom." "I thought I was supposed to be resting," he protested. Delilah paused in the doorway. "Counting cans isn't exactly strenuous work, Mr. Quinn, unless you'd prefer to deal with Mrs. Henderson and her endless questions about which fabric would best suit her daughter's complexion." Owen took a sip of his coffee to hide his smile. "The storeroom sounds fine." "I thought it might," she said, and he could have sworn he saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward before she left. The mercantile was larger than it appeared from outside, with the main showroom stretching back into shadowy depths filled with everything from clothing and dry goods to tools and ammunition. The smells of coffee, leather, and tobacco mingled in the air as Owen made his way down the stairs and into the store. Delilah was already busy behind the counter, organizing receipts and checking the contents of the cash drawer. She glanced up as he approached. "The ledger for inventory is in the storeroom," she said, gesturing toward a door at the back of the shop. "Everything should be counted and compared against the last entry, discrepancies noted in the margin." Owen nodded, impressed despite himself by her businesslike efficiency. "Yes, madam." He was halfway to the storeroom when the front door opened, bell jingling cheerfully. A woman in her 50s entered, elaborately dressed despite the early hour. "Delilah, dear, I need to see those calicos you mentioned last week. Sophia's coming home for a visit, and I want to have a new dress ready." The woman stopped abruptly, noticing Owen. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." The emphasis she placed on the last word made her meaning clear, and Owen saw Delilah's cheeks flush pink. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Mr. Quinn. He's helping out while Father is in Tucson," Delilah explained, her voice calm despite her coloring. "Mr. Quinn, Mrs. Henderson is one of our most valued customers." Owen touched the brim of his hat politely. "Madam, Mrs. Henderson looked him up and down with undisguised curiosity. "I wasn't aware Jacob had hired additional help." "It's temporary," Delilah said quickly. "Mr. Quinn is just passing through Wickenburg." "I see, Mrs. Henderson replied in a tone that suggested she saw quite a bit more than was being said. "Well, about those calicos." Owen retreated to the storeroom, grateful to escape the woman's scrutiny. The room was organized chaos: shelves packed with goods, barrels stacked in corners, crates waiting to be unpacked. The inventory ledger sat open on a small desk, its pages filled with neat handwriting that he assumed was Delilah's. He had just settled into work when he heard Mrs. Henderson's voice drift through the partially open door. "Staying above the store, without a chaperone. My dear, what would your father say?" "My father would trust my judgment, Mrs. Henderson," Delilah replied evenly. "As should you. I'm only thinking of your reputation, child. A single woman your age must be careful, especially with drifters." "Mr. Quinn is a paying boarder, nothing more," Delilah said firmly. "Now, about those calicos. I have 3 new patterns that might suit Sophia." Owen smiled to himself as she deftly changed the subject. Miss Delilah Ross clearly knew how to handle difficult customers and nosy ones at that. The morning passed quickly as Owen worked his way through the inventory. The task was straightforward but time-consuming, and it gave him too much opportunity to think about his situation. Blackwell was dead, yes, and he'd recovered Sadie, his prized mare. But the confrontation hadn't gone as planned. He'd hoped to simply reclaim his property and disappear, not end up in a knife fight that left him wounded and stranded in a small town. And then there was Miss Ross. She'd saved his life, no doubt about that, but her motives remained unclear. Was it simply her nature to help those in need, or did she have some other reason for taking him in? The storeroom door opened wider, interrupting his thoughts. Delilah stood there, a questioning look on her face. "It's nearly noon," she said. "Are you planning to count those coffee beans all day, or would you like to break for lunch?" Owen realized he'd been staring at the same inventory page for several minutes. "Lunch sounds good," he admitted, setting down his pencil. "I've made sandwiches," she said, gesturing for him to follow her. "We can eat in the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson is minding the store for an hour." The Ross family kitchen was warm and inviting, with copper pots hanging from hooks and herbs drying from the ceiling beams. A table by the window was set for two, simple sandwiches and glasses of lemonade waiting. "You seem to have everything well in hand here," Owen observed as they sat down. "Your father must be proud." Delilah shrugged, but he could see she was pleased by the comment. "It's a family business. We all do our part. You mentioned a brother in California, Thomas. He's in San Francisco working for a shipping company." She took a bite of her sandwich. "He wasn't interested in the mercantile life." "And you are?" Owen asked, genuinely curious. Delilah considered the question. "I like knowing our work matters. People depend on this store for necessities. There's value in that. Most women your age would be focused on finding a husband, not running a business," Owen pointed out, then immediately regretted his words when he saw her expression harden. "Most women my age haven't had much choice in the matter," she replied coolly. "I had to grow up quickly after my mother died." Owen set down his sandwich. "I apologize, that was thoughtless of me." Her expression softened slightly. "It's a common enough assumption. But Wickenburg isn't exactly overflowing with eligible bachelors, Mr. Quinn, and I'm not the type to marry just to say I'm married." "A wise philosophy," he said, relieved she wasn't truly offended. "And please call me Owen. Mr. Quinn makes me feel like I'm in trouble." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You were in trouble when I found you bleeding in my store, Owen." "Fair point," he conceded. "But I'm on the mend now, thanks to you, Delilah." The use of her given name hung in the air between them, more intimate than either had intended. She broke the moment by standing abruptly, gathering their empty plates. "I should get back to the store," she said. "Mrs. Patterson has her own business to attend to." Owen rose too, fighting a wince as his stitches pulled. "What would you like me to do this afternoon?" "There's a shipment of nails that needs sorting," she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "Different sizes need to go in the labeled bins." "Consider it done," he said, following her back through the living quarters to the store. The afternoon stretched into evening, the store finally emptying of customers as the sun began to set. Owen had finished with the nails and moved on to organizing a display of tools, working steadily despite the occasional twinge from his wound. He was surprised by how much he enjoyed the simple, honest work. After months of tracking Blackwell across the territory, the routine of the mercantile was almost soothing. There was something satisfying about putting things in order, knowing exactly where everything belonged. Delilah locked the front door after the last customer departed, turning the sign to closed. She looked tired but satisfied as she began counting the day's receipts. "Good day?" Owen asked, putting away the last of the hammers. "Better than yesterday," she replied, "though Mrs. Henderson will have half the town believing we're engaged by tomorrow." Owen laughed, then pressed a hand to his side as the movement caused a sharp pain. "Sorry about that." Delilah noticed his discomfort immediately. "You should rest. You've done more than enough for today." "I'm fine," he insisted, though he was indeed feeling the fatigue of the day's work. "You're as stubborn as I am," she observed, closing the cash drawer. "Let me check your bandage before supper." Before he could protest, she was beside him, her hands gently lifting his shirt to examine the dressing Dr. Miller had applied. Her touch was clinical but gentle, her face close enough that he could smell the faint lavender scent of her hair. No blood showing through, she noted with satisfaction. But you should still take it easy. Owen was acutely aware of her proximity, of the small furrow of concentration between her brows as she inspected his wound. I've been shot twice and stabbed 3 times in my life, he said, trying to distract himself from her nearness. This barely ranks. Delilah looked up, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. That's not something to be proud of, you know. I'm not proud of it, he said honestly. Just stating facts. She stepped back, releasing his shirt. What kind of life leads a man to be shot and stabbed so many times? Owen Quinn. It was a fair question, one he'd asked himself more than once. A complicated one. That's not an answer, she said, folding her arms. Owen sighed, leaning against the counter. I was a Union soldier, then a scout for the Army after the war. Spent some time as a ranch hand, then did some bounty hunting. Like I said, complicated. And now, she pressed. Now I'm helping a stubborn woman run her father's mercantile while recovering from a knife wound, he replied with a half smile. Delilah wasn't deterred by his attempt at humor. And after that, what are you chasing next, Owen? The question hit closer to home than she could know. What was he chasing? For years, it had been one thing after another: a war, a paycheck, revenge against Blackwell. Now that the last of those was concluded, he found himself without a clear direction for the first time in years. I don't know, he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. I haven't thought that far ahead. Something in his tone must have revealed more than he intended, because Delilah's expression softened. Well, you have a week to figure it out, she said, turning toward the back of the store. Come on, I promised you supper and I make a decent stew. Owen followed her, grateful for the change of subject. The conversation had veered too close to matters he wasn't ready to discuss, not with her, not with anyone. Supper was indeed a decent stew, rich with beef and vegetables, accompanied by fresh bread that Delilah admitted she'd purchased from the bakery down the street. I can cook, she explained, but baking is beyond me. Mother tried to teach me, but I never had the patience for it. It's good nonetheless, Owen assured her, breaking off another piece of the crusty loaf. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the lamp casting warm light across the kitchen table. Outside, the sounds of Wickenburg at night drifted through the open window, distant piano music, the occasional burst of laughter from the saloon, the clip-clop of horses passing by. What's it like? Delilah asked suddenly, moving from place to place, never settling down. Owen considered the question. Freeing in some ways, lonely in others, he said finally. There's always something new on the horizon, but nothing permanent to return to. No family waiting for you somewhere, he shook his head. Parents died when I was young, no siblings, no wife or children. He looked at her curiously. Would you want that life, the freedom to go anywhere, do anything? Delilah twirled her spoon thoughtfully. Sometimes I think I would. Wickenburg is small, the same faces, the same conversations, year after year. She glanced around the kitchen. But then there's something to be said for roots, for belonging somewhere. Yes, Owen agreed quietly. There is. Later, as he climbed the stairs to his room, Owen found himself thinking about belonging. It had been years since he'd felt he truly belonged anywhere or to anyone. The Army had come close, giving him purpose and brotherhood, but even that had been temporary. He paused on the landing, looking back down toward the kitchen where Delilah was finishing the dishes. In just one day, she'd made him feel more welcome than he'd felt in years. It was a dangerous feeling. Comfort could lead to complacency, to wanting things he couldn't have, like a place to belong. Like her. Owen shook his head, continuing up the stairs. He was here for a week, no more. Just long enough to heal, to repay his debt to her, and then he'd be gone. That was the way it had to be, no matter how much a part of him might wish otherwise. The next few days fell into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. Owen rose early each morning, taking breakfast with Delilah before they opened the store together. He managed the heavier work despite her protests, lifting crates and moving inventory while she handled customers and kept the books. To his surprise, he found he had a talent for retail. His years of observing people as a scout and bounty hunter translated well to anticipating customers' needs, and his direct manner put many of the town's men at ease in a way Delilah's presence sometimes didn't. "Mr. Thornton actually bought a new shirt," Delilah marveled on the third day, after the gruff rancher had departed with not only the ammunition he'd come for but also clothing. "I've been trying to sell him one for months. His old one is practically falling apart." Owen shrugged, restocking the shelf where the shirts had been displayed. "I just mentioned it might help his negotiations with the cattle buyers from Prescott. Men like him care about respect, not appearance." Once he saw the shirt as a tool for earning respect rather than a frivolity, the decision was simple. Delilah looked at him with new appreciation. "You understand people." "Some people," he corrected, "the ones I've had to deal with in my line of work." "Still," she insisted, "it's a gift. You should use it for more than tracking criminals." Owen didn't respond to that, uncomfortable with the implication that he might have options he'd never considered. Instead, he changed the subject. "Is there more coffee?" If Delilah noticed his deflection, she didn't comment on it. "In the kitchen, help yourself." As the days passed, Owen found himself sharing more of his past with Delilah. During quiet moments in the store or over meals, he told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his service during the war, his travels across the Western Territories. In return, she shared stories of growing up in Wickenburg, of her mother's illness and death, of her dreams for the future. "I want to expand the store," she confided as they sat on the small porch behind the mercantile one evening, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Add a proper ladies' section with dressmaking supplies, maybe even ready-made clothing. Wickenburg is growing. The women here want nice things, not just necessities." "Your father doesn't agree?" Owen asked, noticing the longing in her voice. Delilah sighed. "He's cautious. The mercantile has been run the same way since he opened it 15 years ago. Change doesn't come easily to him." "But he trusts you to run it while he's away," Owen pointed out. "That says something." "I suppose it does," she acknowledged with a small smile. "Though I doubt he imagined I'd hire a wounded cowboy to help out." "Technically, you didn't hire me," Owen reminded her. "You extorted labor in exchange for room and board." Delilah laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I prefer to think of it as resourceful negotiation." Owen found himself laughing too, despite the twinge in his side. "Is that what we're calling it?" Their eyes met in the fading light, and something shifted in the air between them. Delilah's smile softened, and Owen became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the way the evening breeze played with a loose strand of her hair. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass, until the distant church bell chimed the hour and broke the spell. Delilah stood abruptly. "I should start supper." "I'll help," Owen offered, rising to follow her inside. "You don't have to," she began, but he cut her off gently. "I want to," he said simply. That night, as they prepared the meal together, moving around the kitchen in easy synchronicity, Owen realized how dangerous this arrangement had become. He was growing attached to the store, to this town, to Delilah herself. When the time came to leave, it would be harder than he'd anticipated. The fourth morning dawned bright and clear, promising another scorching Arizona day. Owen woke early, his side aching less than it had the day before. He dressed carefully, noting that the borrowed shirt from Delilah's brother now felt familiar, comfortable. Too comfortable. He found Delilah already in the kitchen, her hair still loose around her shoulders as she prepared breakfast. She looked up as he entered, a smile brightening her face. "You're up early," she observed, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Thought I'd get a head start on those crates that arrived yesterday," he explained, accepting the cup gratefully. "They need to be unpacked before the store opens." Delilah nodded, returning to the stove where bacon sizzled in a pan. "Father's letter arrived last night after you went to bed." "He'll be home day after tomorrow." Owen felt a pang of something that might have been disappointment. "Good, you'll have proper help again." "Yes," she agreed, though her tone lacked enthusiasm, "though I must say you've been more help than I expected." High praise indeed, he teased, trying to lighten the sudden heaviness in the air. Delilah turned to face him, her expression serious. I mean it, Owen, I've enjoyed having you here. The simple honesty of her statement caught him off guard. I've enjoyed being here, he admitted, meeting her gaze. More than I thought possible. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling neither was ready to name. Delilah broke the connection first, turning back to the stove. We should eat, she said briskly. It's going to be a busy day. She was right about that. The store was unusually crowded from the moment they opened, with ranchers stocking up on supplies and townspeople coming in to collect orders. Owen found himself constantly in motion, fetching items from the storeroom, helping customers carry purchases to their wagons, and restocking shelves as quickly as they emptied. By mid-afternoon, he was feeling the strain, his wound protesting the constant activity. He was just considering taking a brief rest when the store's bell jangled and 3 men entered, their spurs clanking loudly on the wooden floor. Owen's instincts, honed by years of dangerous work, immediately sensed trouble. The men were trail-worn but heavily armed, their eyes scanning the store with calculated assessment rather than shopping interest. One man, taller than the others with a thick black beard, seemed to be the leader. His gaze settled on Delilah behind the counter. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his politeness not quite masking the hardness in his voice. "This the only general store in town?" "It is," Delilah replied calmly, though Owen could see the tension in her shoulders. "What can I help you with today?" The bearded man approached the counter, his companions spreading out through the store. "Need some supplies, ammunition mainly. Got any .44 caliber?" "We do," Delilah confirmed, glancing briefly at Owen. "How many boxes would you like?" "All you've got," the man replied with a cold smile. Owen moved casually toward the gun display, positioning himself where he could watch all 3 men. The store had emptied of other customers, leaving only them and an elderly man examining tools in the corner. "That's quite a lot of ammunition," Delilah said carefully. "May I ask what you need it for?" The bearded man's smile disappeared. "Hunting. Must be some hunt," Owen remarked, drawing the man's attention. The stranger looked Owen up and down, assessing him. "You work here?" "I do," Owen replied evenly. "Owen Quinn." Recognition flickered in the man's eyes. "Quinn, the bounty hunter?" Owen nodded once, acutely aware that the situation had just become more complicated. "That's right." The bearded man's hand drifted toward his holster. "Heard you were retired." "Semi-retired," Owen corrected, his own hand casually resting on the counter near the shotgun Delilah kept beneath it. "Still keep my hand in when necessary." A tense silence filled the store. The elderly customer, sensing danger, quietly made his way to the exit and slipped out. Delilah remained behind the counter, her face composed despite the obvious threat. "We don't want trouble," the bearded man said finally, his hand moving away from his gun. "Just supplies." "Then you'll pay for them like anyone else," Owen replied, not moving from his position. The man stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." He turned back to Delilah. "The ammunition, please, and some jerky, coffee, and whatever else you've got that travels well." Delilah gathered the requested items, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Owen watched the other 2 men carefully as they pretended to browse, noting their positions and the weapons they carried. When Delilah announced the total, the bearded man paid without complaint, even adding a generous tip. "For your trouble," he said, though the words sounded more like a warning than an apology. The 3 men gathered their purchases and left, the bell jangling cheerfully behind them. As soon as they were gone, Delilah sagged against the counter. "Who were they?" she asked, her voice steady despite her pale face. "Trouble," Owen replied grimly, moving to the window to watch the men mount their horses. "The one with the beard is Sam Hollister. He used to ride with the Collins gang before going out on his own. Bank robberies, mostly." "And he recognized you," Delilah observed. Owen nodded, watching as the men rode out of town heading south. "I brought in his brother 2 years ago. He died in prison." "Will they come back?" "Not today," Owen said, turning from the window, "but they're planning something." No one buys that much ammunition for hunting. Delilah straightened, her momentary weakness gone. We should tell Sheriff Burke. I'll go, Owen offered. You stay here. She looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. Be careful. The sheriff's office was at the end of the main street, a sturdy adobe building with iron bars on the windows. Sheriff Burke was a former Texas Ranger in his 50s, his hair and mustache more salt than pepper. He listened to Owen's concerns with the careful attention of a man who'd learned the hard way not to dismiss potential threats. Hollister, he repeated thoughtfully. I've heard the name, didn't know he was operating in this territory. He wasn't last I heard, Owen said. He usually keeps to New Mexico and Texas. Burke stroked his mustache. Any idea what might bring him here? The bank, maybe, or the payroll coming in for the mine workers next week. Owen leaned against the sheriff's desk. Whatever it is, they're preparing for something big. I'll wire the marshals in Phoenix, Burke decided, and keep an eye out. You think they recognized you? Hollister did, Owen confirmed, but I don't think that's why they're here. This felt planned, not opportunistic. The sheriff eyed him curiously. Heard you were staying above the mercantile, working for Jacob Ross's daughter. Temporarily, Owen clarified. I was injured. Miss Ross offered me room and board in exchange for help while her father's away. Burke's expression remained neutral, but Owen could see the speculation in his eyes. Jacob's due back soon, I hear. Day after tomorrow, Owen confirmed, and then, the sheriff asked, you moving on? It was a loaded question, and both men knew it. Owen had built a reputation over the years not as an outlaw, but as a man who didn't stay in one place for long. A drifter with a gun and a knack for finding trouble. Haven't decided, Owen said finally. Depends on what happens with Hollister. Burke nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. Well, we could use someone with your experience if things turn sour. Consider yourself deputized if you're willing. The offer surprised Owen. I'm not sure I'm the law enforcement type, Sheriff. You've brought in your share of wanted men, Burke pointed out. That's close enough for me. Think about it. Owen left the sheriff's office with an uneasy feeling. His encounter with Hollister had complicated matters in ways he hadn't anticipated. If trouble was coming to Wickenburg, and he was certain it was, he couldn't simply ride away when his wound healed, not with Delilah potentially in danger. The thought of Delilah brought a different kind of unease. In less than a week, she'd become important to him in ways he didn't fully understand. Or perhaps he understood all too well and was simply unwilling to admit it. When he returned to the mercantile, he found Delilah closing up early, turning away a customer with apologies. What did the sheriff say? She asked as soon as Owen entered. He's taking it seriously, Owen assured her. He's wiring the marshals in Phoenix. Delilah nodded, locking the door behind the departed customer. Good, those men. She shuddered slightly. The way they looked at everything, like they were calculating its value. That's exactly what they were doing, Owen confirmed grimly. Hollister's planning something, I'm just not sure what. Will you go after them? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Owen hesitated. It would be the sensible course of action, track Hollister and his men, determine their plans, stop them before they could carry them out. It's what he would have done without hesitation a week ago. But a week ago, he hadn't known Delilah Ross. Burke offered to deputize me, he said instead of answering directly. Temporarily. Surprise flickered across Delilah's face, and you agreed. I didn't say yes or no, Owen admitted, but if Hollister's planning what I think he is, the sheriff could use the help. Delilah studied his face for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're not planning to leave when Father returns, are you? Not while Hollister's out there, Owen confirmed. I can't. Because of your history with him, she asked perceptively. Owen met her gaze directly. Partly. And partly because of you. The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Delilah's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Owen thought he'd overstepped, revealed too much too soon. Then she moved toward him, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. I don't want you to leave, she said softly. Not because of Hollister or the sheriff, because of me. Owen's heart quickened as she stood before him, so close he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he raised his hand to her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Delilah," he began, but words failed him. Instead, he leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened as she responded, her hands coming to rest on his chest. The moment was perfect, sweet and honest, and everything he hadn't known he wanted until now. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I should have done that days ago," he murmured. Delilah smiled, her fingers still curled in the fabric of his shirt. "Better late than never, Mr. Quinn." Owen laughed softly, then kissed her again simply because he could. Because somehow, in the space of less than a week, this woman had worked her way into his heart with her stubbornness, her intelligence, her quiet strength. When the kiss ended, reality intruded once more. "Hollister's still out there," Owen reminded her reluctantly. "And whatever he's planning, it's not good." Delilah's expression turned serious again. "What do we do? First, I need to talk to Burke again," Owen decided. "Then we need to warn your father. If Hollister's targeting the bank or the mine payroll, everyone in town could be at risk." She nodded, practical even in the face of personal revelations. "I'll write to father immediately. He might be able to return sooner." As they separated to attend to these tasks, Owen felt a strange mix of emotions. Concern for the threat Hollister posed, certainly, but also a surprising sense of purpose, of belonging. For the first time in years, he wasn't just passing through, taking on other people's problems for pay. He was defending someone that mattered to him. It was terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning dawned with an ominous red sky, the air heavy with the promise of one of Arizona's rare summer storms. Owen woke early, his side aching from a restless night spent considering possible scenarios. If Hollister was planning what Owen suspected, a raid on the mine payroll due to arrive in 3 days, then the timing was critical. He found Delilah already in the kitchen, sealing a letter. "For father," she explained. "I'm sending it with Mr. Daniels. He's heading to Tucson this morning and should intercept father on the road back." "Good thinking," Owen approved, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much," she admitted, dark circles beneath her eyes confirming her words. "I kept thinking about those men, what they might do." Owen reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We'll be ready for them, whatever they're planning. Will we?" She asked, vulnerability showing through her usual composure. "This isn't just about the store, Owen. People could get hurt." "They won't," he promised, squeezing her hand gently. "Not if I can help it." After breakfast, Owen met with Sheriff Burke again, this time joined by the town's mayor and bank manager. They discussed security measures, contingency plans, and the possibility of delaying the mine payroll's arrival. "Can't be delayed," the bank manager, a nervous man named Wilson, insisted. "The miners are already restless about late payments. Another delay could trigger a strike or worse." "Better unhappy miners than dead ones," Owen pointed out bluntly. "If Hollister hits that shipment, there will be bloodshed." Mayor Collins, a portly man with political aspirations beyond Wickenburg, stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Perhaps we could bring in additional security. The mine owners would pay for it, I'm sure." "Not enough time," Burke said, shaking his head. "The payroll arrives day after tomorrow. Even if we wired Phoenix now, we'd be lucky to get 2 or 3 deputies here in time." "Then we use what we have," Owen decided. "The element of surprise. Hollister thinks he knows what's happening, but we can change the game." The men looked at him expectantly, and Owen outlined his plan. It was risky but feasible, a false payroll wagon serving as bait, with the real money taking an alternate route into town. Burke and Owen, along with a few trusted men, would be waiting to ambush Hollister when he took the bait. "It could work," Burke said slowly when Owen finished. "But it depends on Hollister doing exactly what we expect." "He will," Owen assured them. "I know how he operates. He's predictable, arrogant, but predictable." The meeting broke up with tentative agreement on the plan, contingent on the mayor securing volunteers to assist. Owen left feeling cautiously optimistic. If everything went as expected, Hollister would be in custody within 3 days. and the threat to Wickenburg to Delilah would be neutralized. When he returned to the mercantile, he found Delilah dealing with a crowd of customers, all buzzing with rumors about the outlaws spotted near town. She handled them with remarkable patience, neither confirming nor denying the speculation, simply focusing on their purchases. "You're good at that," Owen observed when the last customer had departed, leaving them momentarily alone in the store. "At what?" she asked, straightening a display that had been disturbed by the day's traffic. "Calming people without lying to them," he clarified, helping her reorganize the items. "It's a rare skill," Delilah smiled wryly. "Years of practice. In a small town, panic spreads faster than desert fire." She looked up at him, her expression turning serious. "What did the sheriff say? Is there a plan?" Owen explained the strategy they'd devised, watching her face carefully as he outlined the risks. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "You'll be in the ambush party," she stated rather than asked. "Yes," he confirmed, seeing no point in denying it. "Burke needs someone who knows Hollister." Delilah nodded once, her lips pressed together in a tight line. "I understand." "Delilah," he began, reaching for her hand, but she stepped back. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not going to ask you not to do this. I know it's necessary." "I know it's who you are." She took a deep breath. "But I don't have to pretend I'm happy about it." Before Owen could respond, the store bell jangled as a customer entered. Delilah turned away to greet them, her professional smile firmly in place, leaving Owen with the distinct impression that much remained unsaid between them. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Owen split his time between the store and the sheriff's office, finalizing details of the ambush plan while still helping Delilah with the mercantile's business. By evening, everything was arranged. The false payroll wagon would depart Phoenix the next morning, while the real money would travel by a circuitous route, arriving in Wickenburg after nightfall. As they closed the store that evening, the promised storm finally arrived, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rolling across the desert. Owen secured the shutters while Delilah lit lamps against the premature darkness. "Quite a storm," he remarked, returning to the main room where she was finishing the day's accounting. "We need the rain," she replied absently, not looking up from her ledger. "It's been too dry this summer." Owen watched her for a moment, noting the deliberate way she avoided meeting his eyes. "Delilah," he said quietly, "talk to me." She set down her pencil with careful precision. "What would you like me to say, Owen?" "Whatever you're thinking," he answered honestly. "Whatever's troubling you." Delilah finally looked up at him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "I'm thinking that I've known you less than a week, and somehow you've become important enough that the thought of you facing Hollister tomorrow terrifies me." She laughed humorlessly. "I'm thinking that I must be a fool to care this much this quickly." Owen moved to her side, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "If you're a fool, then so am I," he said softly, "because I feel the same way." "Do you?" she challenged. "Or is this just another town, another adventure before you move on?" The question stung, but Owen recognized the fear behind it. "I've spent years moving from place to place," he acknowledged, "never staying long enough to put down roots, never wanting to." He took her hands in his. "Until now, until you." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Delilah's face as she studied him, searching for truth in his words. "How can I believe that?" she whispered. "How can either of us know what this is after so little time?" "I don't have an answer for that," Owen admitted. "I just know that when I think about leaving Wickenburg, about leaving you, it feels wrong in a way nothing else ever has." A tear slipped down Delilah's cheek, and Owen brushed it away gently with his thumb. "I'm scared," she confessed. "Not just of tomorrow, of Hollister. I'm scared of what happens after, whether you stay or go." "I can't promise what happens after," Owen said truthfully. "But I can promise you this, I will come back from tomorrow, and then we'll figure out the rest together." Thunder cracked overhead as Delilah leaned forward, her lips meeting his in a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't: fear, hope, longing. Owen returned it with equal fervor, his hands cradling her face as if she were something infinitely precious. When they parted, breathless, Delilah rested her forehead against his. "You'd better keep that promise, Owen Quinn," she murmured, "or I'll never forgive you." "Yes, madam," he replied with a small smile. "I wouldn't dream of crossing you." That night, as the storm raged outside, they sat together before the kitchen fireplace, talking until the early hours of the morning. Not of danger or plans or fears, but of simpler things, childhood memories, favorite books, dreams they'd once held. It was as if both recognized the need to know each other better, to fill in the gaps that their short acquaintance had left. When dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving the desert air clean and crisp. Owen rose early, dressing quietly to avoid waking Delilah, who had finally fallen asleep in her own room just a few hours earlier. He was buckling on his gun belt when she appeared in the doorway of his room, her hair loose around her shoulders and her eyes still heavy with sleep. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye," she accused softly. Owen sighed. "I thought it would be easier." "Easier for whom?" she asked, entering the room fully. She was still in her nightdress, covered by a robe hastily thrown on. The impropriety of the situation might have scandalized Mrs. Henderson, but neither of them particularly cared at that moment. "For both of us," Owen admitted, checking his revolver one last time before holstering it. "I'm not good at goodbyes." "This isn't goodbye," Delilah reminded him, moving to stand before him. "This is I'll see you later." Owen smiled despite himself. "I'll see you later then." She reached up, straightening his collar with careful hands. "Be careful, Hollister has more to lose than you do." "I disagree," Owen replied, catching her hands and bringing them to his lips. "I have everything to lose now." Delilah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she blinked them away resolutely. "Go, do what you need to do, and then come back to me." With one last kiss, gentle and promising, Owen departed. As he walked through the quiet streets of Wickenburg toward the sheriff's office, he felt a curious mix of emotions, determination regarding the task ahead, but also a sense of purpose that went beyond just stopping Hollister. For the first time in years, he had a reason to be careful, a reason to come back. Sheriff Burke was waiting with 4 volunteers, the blacksmith, a miner on leave, and 2 ranchers. All were grim-faced but determined, armed with rifles and resolute expressions. "Ready?" Burke asked as Owen approached. Owen nodded, checking his weapons one final time. "As will ever be." They rode out of town as the sun crested the eastern mountains, heading toward the ambush point. They'd selected a narrow pass where the trail from Phoenix wound between steep, rocky slopes. It was the perfect location, offering both cover for their party and limited escape routes for Hollister's men. As they rode, Owen found himself thinking of Delilah, of the future they might have if today went as planned. It was a dangerous distraction, but also a powerful motivation. He forced himself to focus on the task at hand, reviewing the plan with Burke and the others as they reached the ambush site and took their positions. The waiting was always the hardest part. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher in the sky, baking the rocks around them and testing their patience. Burke shared his canteen with Owen as they watched the trail from their vantage point. "You and the Ross girl," the sheriff said conversationally. "It's serious?" Owen glanced at him, surprised by the personal question. "Yes," he answered simply. Burke nodded thoughtfully. "Jacob Ross is a good man, protective of his daughter, though." "As he should be," Owen acknowledged. "He'll want to know your intentions," the sheriff continued, "when he gets back." Owen hadn't thought that far ahead, but the question didn't unsettle him as it might have a week ago. "I'll tell him the truth, that I care for her and I intend to stay in Wickenburg if she'll have me." Burke seemed satisfied with this answer. "Town could use a man with your skills," he observed. "Deputy positions open if you're interested." Before Owen could respond, one of the ranchers gave a low whistle, the signal they'd arranged. Riders were approaching. All conversation ceased as they readied their weapons, peering through the rocks at the trail below. The false payroll wagon came into view first, driven by a deputy from Phoenix with another man riding shotgun. They dressed it to look official, with the mine company's logo painted on the side. It moved slowly, deliberately presenting an enticing target. Minutes later, the first of Hollister's men appeared on a ridge overlooking the trail. He signaled to someone out of sight, and Owen tensed, knowing the attack was imminent. It happened quickly. 6 riders, Hollister among them, emerged from concealment and surrounded the wagon, guns drawn. The Phoenix deputies raised their hands as ordered, playing their parts perfectly. Burke gave the signal, and the ambush party opened fire, aiming carefully to avoid hitting the deputies. 2 of Hollister's men fell immediately. The others, including Hollister himself, took cover behind the wagon, returning fire with surprising discipline. The gunfight was fierce but brief. With their position on higher ground and the element of surprise, Burke's party had the advantage. One by one, Hollister's men were hit or surrendered until only Hollister himself remained, pinned behind the wagon wheel. "It's over, Hollister," Burke called out. "Throw out your weapon and stand up with your hands raised." For a moment there was silence. Then Hollister's voice, strained but defiant, "Quinn, I know you're up there. Come down and face me man to man, or I kill these deputies." Owen exchanged glances with Burke, who shook his head firmly. "Don't do it," the sheriff warned. "He's desperate," but Owen had already made his decision. "Cover me," he said, rising from his position. "If he makes any move toward those deputies, shoot him." Before Burke could protest further, Owen began making his way down the rocky slope toward the wagon, his gun held ready. "I'm coming down, Hollister," he called. "Let the deputies go." "Drop your gun first," Hollister demanded. "Not happening," Owen replied calmly. "You're surrounded, outnumbered, and out of options. It's over." He reached the bottom of the slope, now fully exposed if Hollister decided to try a desperate shot. The deputies remained frozen in their positions on the wagon seat, their faces tense. "It was you, wasn't it?" Hollister called from behind the wagon. "You figured out our plan." "It wasn't difficult," Owen replied, moving closer with careful steps. "You were never as smart as you thought you were, Sam." A bitter laugh came from behind the wagon. "Smart enough to know when I'm finished." There was a pause then. "Your woman at the store, pretty little thing, be a shame if anything happened to her." Owen's blood ran cold at the implied threat. "There's no one else, Sam. Your men are dead or captured. It's just you now." "Not quite," Hollister replied, and the satisfaction in his voice sent warning signals through Owen's mind. Before he could react, gunfire erupted from the ridge above, not from Burke's position, but from the opposite side of the pass. Owen threw himself to the ground as bullets kicked up dust around him. Hollister had additional men positioned as backup, a contingency Owen hadn't anticipated. The ambush party returned fire and the pass became a storm of bullets and ricocheting lead. Owen crawled toward the wagon, determined to reach Hollister before he could escape in the confusion. The deputies had taken cover, one of them wounded but still conscious. "Quinn." Burke shouted from above. 3 riders heading back toward town. We can't get a clear shot toward town. Toward Delilah. Owen's heart raced as he realized Hollister's true plan. The payroll had been a diversion all along, a way to draw the sheriff and any resistance out of Wickenburg, leaving the town vulnerable. With renewed determination, Owen lunged around the wagon, coming face to face with Hollister. The outlaw had used the distraction to mount his horse, but Owen's sudden appearance startled the animal, which reared in panic. Hollister's first shot went wide as he struggled to control his horse. Owen didn't miss. His bullet caught Hollister in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from the saddle. Before the outlaw could recover, Owen was on him, disarming him with a brutal efficiency born of desperate fear. "Your men," Owen demanded, pressing his gun to Hollister's chest. "How many headed for town?" Hollister laughed through bloodied teeth. "Enough," he spat. "More than enough for one pretty shopkeeper." Owen fought the urge to pull the trigger, reminding himself that Hollister was more valuable alive at this moment than dead. "Burke," he shouted, "I've got Hollister. We need to get back to town now." The sheriff slid down the slope, taking in the situation quickly. "The others are pursuing the riders, but they've got a head start." "Take him," Owen said, hauling Hollister to his feet and shoving him toward Burke. "I'm going after them." "Quinn, wait," Burke began, but Owen was already mounting Hollister's abandoned horse. "Delilah's in danger," he called back as he spurred the animal forward. "I won't wait." The ride back to Wickenburg was a blur of dust and pounding hooves. Owen pushed the horse to its limits, fear driving him forward as much as determination. All he could think about was Delilah, alone in the mercantile, unaware of the danger heading her way. He reached the outskirts of town to find everything eerily normal, no gunfire, no commotion. For a moment, he dared to hope that he'd outpaced Hollister's men, that they hadn't yet reached Wickenburg. Then he saw the smoke. A thin column of dark smoke rose from the direction of the bank, and as Owen rode into the main street, he could see people running, shouting, pointing. The bank's front window was shattered, and armed men were emerging with bags that could only contain money. 3 men, just as Burke had reported. They were mounting their horses, preparing to flee with their spoils when Owen rounded the corner. One spotted him immediately, shouting a warning to his companions. Guns were drawn, bullets flying as Owen threw himself from his horse and took cover behind a water trough. The townsfolk scattered, diving into doorways and behind barrels as the outlaws focused their fire on Owen. He returned fire carefully, conserving ammunition and trying to avoid hitting any bystanders. One outlaw fell, clutching his leg. Another's horse bolted when a bullet grazed its flank, leaving the rider stranded in the middle of the street. The third man, seeing his companions neutralized, made a desperate decision. Abandoning the money bags, he ran toward the nearest building, the mercantile. Owen's heart stopped. "No," he shouted, breaking cover to pursue the man despite the bullets still flying from the wounded outlaw in the street. He reached the mercantile's door just as it slammed shut. Through the window, he could see the outlaw inside, his gun drawn as he searched the apparently empty store. "Delilah," Owen called, trying to see any sign of her. "Delilah, where are you?" The outlaw turned at Owen's shout, firing through the window. Glass shattered around Owen as he ducked, then kicked in the door, his own gun ready. The interior of the store was dim after the bright sunlight outside. Owen moved cautiously, scanning for both the outlaw and Delilah. Display shelves created a maze of potential hiding places, and the back rooms offered even more. "Come out, Quinn," the outlaw called from somewhere in the shadows, "or I start shooting up this nice store." "Let's talk about this," Owen replied, moving slowly between shelves. "Your friends are down, Hollister's captured, there's no way out." A bitter laugh came from near the counter. "Might as well go out with some company then." The sound of a struggle suddenly erupted from the back room, followed by Delilah's voice. "Let go of me." Owen's blood ran cold. He moved toward the sound, all caution forgotten in his fear for Delilah. As he rounded the end of a shelf, he saw them. The outlaw had Delilah by the arm, his gun pressed to her side. "There you are," the man said, grinning at Owen. "Drop your gun or she dies." Owen froze, his weapon half raised. Delilah's eyes met his, wide with fear but also something else, determination. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "All right," Owen said slowly, beginning to lower his gun. "Just don't hurt her." The outlaw's grip on Delilah loosened slightly as Owen's gun lowered. It was the opening she needed. With a sudden movement, she drove her elbow hard into her captor's stomach, then stomped on his foot with all her strength. The outlaw cursed, his gun wavering as he instinctively reached for his injured foot. Owen didn't hesitate. His shot was clean and precise, catching the outlaw in the shoulder of his gun arm. The man dropped his weapon with a howl of pain, and Delilah scrambled away from him. Owen was across the room in an instant, kicking the fallen gun away and grabbing the outlaw by his shirt. With a single powerful blow, he knocked the man unconscious, then turned to Delilah. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though she was trembling slightly. "I was in the storeroom when I heard the commotion. I tried to hide, but he found me." Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as relief washed over him. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. Delilah clung to him, her face pressed against his chest. "I knew you'd come," she said simply. The sound of approaching footsteps made them separate reluctantly. Sheriff Burke appeared in the doorway, his revolver drawn. Behind him were several townspeople, including the deputy who'd remained in Wickenburg. "Quinn," Burke acknowledged, taking in the scene quickly. I see you got him. Miss Ross helped, Owen replied, keeping one arm protectively around Delilah's shoulders. Burke nodded to Delilah respectfully. You all right, Miss Ross? Yes, Sheriff, she confirmed, though my father's store is somewhat worse for wear. The sheriff chuckled, the sound relieved. Windows can be replaced, people can't, he gestured to the unconscious outlaw. Wilson, get this trash to the jail. The others are already there, along with Hollister. As the deputy dragged the outlaw away, Burke turned back to Owen. You did good work today, Quinn. Couldn't have done it without you. What about the bank? Owen asked, remembering the smoke he'd seen. They set a fire as a distraction, but it's under control, Burke assured him. Got most of the money back too, the rest we'll recover from those we captured. With a final nod to them both, Burke departed to help restore order in the town, leaving Owen and Delilah alone in the damaged mercantile. Glass crunched underfoot as Delilah moved to examine a broken display case. Father's going to have a fit when he sees this, she sighed, carefully picking up a shattered jar of hard candies. Owen stepped up beside her, taking the broken jar from her hands and setting it aside. Delilah, he said softly, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, and he was struck by the strength he saw there. Despite everything she'd just endured, there was no hysteria, no collapse, just the same steady resilience he'd first noticed when she'd found him bleeding in her store. I love you, he said simply. Delilah's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise, then a smile, radiant and true, spread across her face. I love you too, she whispered, though your timing could use some work. Owen laughed, pulling her into his arms. I've never been known for my good timing, he admitted. But I'm hoping to improve. Oh, she murmured, her arms winding around his neck. And how do you plan to do that? By staying, he said softly. If you'll have me, Burke offered me a deputy position. I'm thinking of taking it. Delilah's smile turned mischievous. What happened to the drifter who couldn't stay in one place? The man with no roots. He found something worth staying for, Owen replied honestly. Someone worth changing for. Their lips met in a kiss that promised new beginnings, shared futures, love that had bloomed unexpectedly but no less powerfully for its swift growth. When they finally parted, Delilah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What will you tell my father? She asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Owen stroked her hair gently. The truth. That I love his daughter and want to make a life with her, that I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of her. He'll be suspicious, Delilah warned. He doesn't trust easily. Neither do I, Owen pointed out. But you taught me to try. A sound at the door made them turn. Jacob Ross stood in the entrance, his travel-worn figure silhouetted against the afternoon light. His eyes took in the broken window, the scattered merchandise, his daughter in the arms of a man he'd never met. Father. Delilah exclaimed, stepping away from Owen but not completely out of his embrace. You're back early. Got your letter on the road, Jacob replied, his voice gruff as he entered the store. Seems I missed some excitement. That's one word for it, Delilah said with a small laugh. Father, this is Owen Quinn. He's been helping while you were away. Jacob's sharp eyes assessed Owen thoroughly. Helping how exactly, sir? Owen began, stepping forward with his hand extended. It's a long story, but the short version is that your daughter saved my life, gave me work when I needed it, and just now helped me capture an outlaw who was trying to rob the bank. Jacob's eyebrows rose as he reluctantly shook Owen's hand. Is that so? It's true, Father, Delilah confirmed. Owen was injured when he came into the store last week. I convinced him to see Dr. Miller, and in return, he's been helping here. And the outlaw? Jacob asked. Part of Hollister's gang, Owen explained. They tried to hit the town while the sheriff and I were dealing with a diversion. We caught most of them, but 3 made it to town. Jacob looked around at the damaged store, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he chuckled. 1 week, he said, shaking his head. I leave for 1 week and my daughter takes in a wounded stranger, helps capture outlaws, and apparently finds herself a suitor. Delilah blushed deeply. Father, am I wrong? Jacob asked, looking between them knowingly. Owen straightened, meeting the older man's gaze directly. No, sir, you're not. I care deeply for your daughter, and with your blessing, I intend to court her properly." Jacob studied him for a long moment. "You're the bounty hunter, I've heard of you." "Former bounty hunter," Owen corrected. "Sheriff Burke has offered me a deputy position." "Has he now?" Jacob mused. "And you're planning to accept, to stay in Wickenburg?" "Yes, sir," Owen confirmed without hesitation, "if you have no objection." Jacob looked at his daughter, noting the way she stood tall beside Owen, her hand finding his as if it belonged there. "Delilah has always had good judgment," he said finally. "Better than mine sometimes. If she trusts you, Mr. Quinn, then I'm willing to give you a chance to prove yourself worthy of that trust." Relief washed over Owen. It wasn't a wholehearted blessing, but it was a start. "Thank you, sir." "I won't disappoint either of you." Jacob nodded once, then turned his attention to the store. "Well, let's see how bad the damage is. Insurance should cover most of it." As Jacob moved away to assess the broken window, Delilah squeezed Owen's hand. "That went better than expected," she whispered. "He's a reasonable man," Owen replied softly. "Like his daughter." "I'm stubborn," she corrected with a small smile. "Like my father." "That too," Owen agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "but I wouldn't have it any other way." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Wickenburg gradually returned to normal after the excitement of the Hollister gang's capture. The bank was repaired, the mercantile's window replaced, and the town settled back into its usual rhythms. Owen officially accepted the deputy position, moving from the room above the mercantile to a small house near the sheriff's office. The arrangement satisfied Jacob's sense of propriety while still allowing Owen to visit Delilah regularly, their courtship proceeding under the watchful but increasingly approving eyes of the town. The wounds that had brought them together healed cleanly, leaving only a scar to remind Owen of that fateful day when Delilah Ross had refused to let him bleed to death in her father's store. "It'll always be a bit tender," Dr. Miller had told him during his final checkup. But it healed well, all things considered. "Thanks to Miss Ross's insistence," Owen had replied with a smile. Dr. Miller had chuckled knowingly. "She's a determined young woman. You could do worse, Deputy Quinn." As summer gave way to fall, Owen found himself settling into Wickenburg in ways he'd never imagined possible. The townspeople, initially wary of the former bounty hunter in their midst, gradually accepted him as one of their own. His skills proved valuable beyond just law enforcement. He helped the blacksmith break difficult horses, taught a few of the older boys how to track game, and even assisted Jacob with the heavier work around the mercantile. And through it all, his relationship with Delilah deepened, growing from the initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring. They spent evenings on the porch behind the mercantile, talking about everything and nothing. They rode together on Sundays, exploring the desert landscape around Wickenburg. They danced at the town's harvest festival, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder as they moved to the music. It was after that dance, walking Delilah home beneath a canopy of stars, that Owen finally asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Marry me," he said, stopping in the middle of the quiet street to turn and face her. Delilah looked up at him, her face illuminated by the silver moonlight. "That's not a question," she pointed out, though her eyes sparkled with humor. Owen smiled, taking both her hands in his. "Delilah Ross, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will." Their wedding took place on a crisp December morning, the church filled with nearly everyone in Wickenburg. Sheriff Burke stood as Owen's best man, while Delilah's cousin from Phoenix served as her maid of honor. Jacob Ross, his initial reservations long since overcome, proudly walked his daughter down the aisle. "Take care of her," he whispered as he placed Delilah's hand in Owen's. "With my life," Owen promised. As they exchanged vows, Owen thought about the twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. A stolen horse, a knife wound, a stubborn woman who wouldn't let him heal on his own terms. He'd come to Wickenburg bleeding and alone, certain that it was just another temporary stop on an endless journey. Instead, he'd found a home, he'd found love. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. You may kiss your bride." As Owen's lips met Delilah's, sealing their union amid the cheers of their friends and neighbors, he silently thanked whatever guardian angel had guided him to her store that day. Some wounds, he reflected, healed in unexpected ways. Spring came to Wickenburg in a riot of desert blooms, the landscape transformed by winter rains. The mercantile, now officially Ross and Quinn General Store, flourished under its shared management. Jacob had surprised them both by offering Owen partnership in the business shortly after the wedding, recognizing that his son-in-law's practical knowledge complemented Delilah's head for figures perfectly. "3 heads are better than 2, the older man had declared. "Besides, I'm not getting any younger. Been thinking about spending more time fishing and less time counting inventory." Owen had accepted gratefully, dividing his time between deputy duties and the store. It was a full life, busier than he'd ever imagined for himself, but deeply satisfying. On a warm April morning, as they prepared to open the store, Delilah approached Owen with an expression he'd come to recognize, the one that meant she had something important to tell him. "What is it?" he asked, setting aside the crate he'd been unpacking. Delilah took a deep breath, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I saw Dr. Miller yesterday." Owen's heart skipped a beat. And, she continued, her smile broadening, "he says we should expect our first child around October." Joy, pure and overwhelming, surged through Owen as he gathered his wife into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. "A baby," he whispered, setting her down gently. "We're having a baby, we are," she confirmed, her eyes shining. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he assured her, placing a hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "I never thought I'd have this, a home, a family, a future worth building." Delilah covered his hand with her own. "All because you got stabbed and were too stubborn to see a doctor." Owen laughed, pulling her close again. "All because you were too stubborn to let me bleed to death in your store," he corrected. "I found the cowboy holding his side," she recited, her voice warm with memory. "He said it'll heal. I said not that way." "You were right," Owen murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. "About everything." As the morning sun streamed through the mercantile window, painting their joined hands with golden light, Owen Quinn silently blessed the wound that had brought him to Delilah Ross. Sometimes, he reflected, the deepest healing came not from medicine or time, but from finding where you truly belonged. And he had found exactly that in Wickenburg, in the mercantile, and most of all in Delilah's arms.